You're listening to the best of the bravest. Interviews with the FDNY's elite. Now, before anyone says anything, as you see me with these shades on tonight, I already briefed my guest who I'll introduce momentarily on it. You know, you're probably looking at me right now saying, Mike, what the hell are you doing? Why do you have that on? So for those of you, as you already know, if you were watching the episode on Monday with another retired FDNY captain, Steve Elliott, as you guys know, I suffer from, on occasion, flare-ups of an eye condition called uveitis, which is related to my ulcerative colitis. And you never know when these flare-ups are going to happen. They happen at random. And it's kind of been going on since Monday. Feeling a little bit better. I'd like to thank everybody for their well wishes. But one of the things that you deal with uveitis, which is, like I said, just inflammation of your left eye, is it gets very watery, can get very irritated because of sensitivity to light. So for tonight's episode, even though I look very goofy, I have these shades on for good reason. That's just to help with the light sensitivity, and we're going to have them on throughout. So I apologize in advance, but it's for a medical reason that I have these shades on. Got ibuprofen by my side, tissues too, just in case. So we're ready to go because I am not going to cancel on tonight's guest. And hey, it's a chill look anyway, says Chris Ebden. I appreciate the sentiment. I really do. But like I said, even though I was battling this condition smack dab in the middle of the show, we had a really good show last time on Monday with retired FDNY captain Steve Elliott. 33 years on the job from 1991 until last year. He recently retired last year, 2024. A lot of truck work in his career, a lot of truck work in tonight's guest's career, which we'll talk about momentarily. But first, as always, a couple of ads, and we're going to start off with none other than Mr. Billy Ryan. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike to New Haven podcast. And of course, a word too from Mr. Brett King and our friends over at Granite State. Hey there, firefighters and fire buffs. If you're tuning in to the Mike to New Haven podcast, you know the value of reliable gear. At Granite State Fire Helmets, we're proud to introduce the TL2, our premium leather Phoenix fire helmet. The TL2 is all about comfort, durability, and that timeless style you trust. And here's the best part. All in-stock inventory usually ships within 24 hours, so you'll have it in your hands in no time. Plus, our company is proudly owned and operated by firemen, so you know we've got your back and understand exactly what you need out there on the front lines. So don't wait. Gear up with the TL2 today. Granite State Fire Helmets, where tradition meets innovation, and where firemen have you covered. Of course, you'll hear from our friends over at Armor Tuff a little bit later when we get to the rapid fire segment. All right, my next guest is a respected fire officer whose 4-decade career in fire and life safety has left an indelible mark both inside and outside the FDNY. From his early days riding rigs in the Bronx as well as Brooklyn to leading Ladder Company 7 in the big bad borough of Manhattan, he's answered the call in some of New York City's busiest neighborhoods and brought that operational experience to bear as an educator as well. Project manager and subject matter expert too in high-rise life safety and emergency management. He's a pioneer in FDNY's training modernization and a driving force behind, I should say, the current Randall's Island Academy setup. So look forward to hearing his stories tonight. He's worn a lot of hats. He's also an author too, as we'll discuss. And that for this volume 78 of the best of the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite is retired FDNY captain of nearly a quarter century on the job, 1979 to 2003 to be exact, Nick Gaudiosi. Cap, welcome. How are you? Good to see you.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good. Yeah, glad to have you. So again, as you guys know in the audience by now, if you want to ask any questions to the captain, fire away. I'll make sure I highlight it at the appropriate time, and we'll have a good conversation tonight. So before I get into getting on the job, first, again, a two-part question, as I always ask every guest. Where'd you grow up, and did you always know, even if you didn't know you wanted to be a fireman right away, that you wanted to be involved in some type of civil service?
Grew up in the Bronx. I was in the 50s and 60s and early 70s. Saw a lot of fires. The Bronx was pretty busy back then, but never thought of joining the fire service till I was in college, when I got into it through other people. But no, really had no idea what I wanted to do, even when I first went to college.
And okay, so we'll jump into that then. Going to college, those other people, who were they?
That brought me into the fire service.
Yeah.
When I was in college, taking accounting courses, and really by my second year realized I did not want to be an accountant. It really, although I could do it, it held no interest for me. My cousin and my brother had joined the volunteer fire department in Long Beach. We had moved to Long Beach in 1974. And they, being in the volunteer fire department, were talking about it. And still, I wasn't interested. Until, and this is strange, there was a girl I was looking to date, and the volunteer fire department has a annual dinner dance. And my cousins said, well, why don't you join the fire department, invite her to the dinner dance as a way of going out with her.
Right.
And I did, and we went to the dinner dance, and that relationship didn't pan out. But once I got in the fire department, I found out I really liked the job. I was in a company with my brother and a couple of friends. All of us were around the same age, like 20 years old. And it was pretty busy in Long Beach back then. Long Beach was about the busiest fire department on Long Island. So we were catching some work, and I liked it. It was being part of a team. I had always played hockey. I was part of a team. And this was another team. And I guess I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. So it really took hold. And then around 1977, the fire department in New York was giving a test, a new test. And one of the guys in the company he always wanted to be a fireman. So he was getting everybody ramped up to take the written test. So, and even at that time, I wasn't thinking of doing it as a career. But I took the test. I did well. And as time went on, I was like, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. So before I graduated, the list had come out, and I saw I did very well. And I made up my mind I wanted to pursue the fire department. And then I was hired in 1979.
Yeah, I mean, the waiting time even back then was a little bit longer because a lot of people were clamoring to take the exam. I mean, you're talking about thousands of people, tens of thousands of people in some cases across New York City. So,
but I did well. I was hired the first year.
And that's impressive because remember, it's not just the written score. You could do very well in the written.
Oh, yeah.
You still got to do good on the physical, too.
At that time, yeah, it was the physical and the Sumner Armory, all these different events, standing broad jump, dummy carry, ledge walk, climbing over an 8-foot wall. Well, one of the things we did in the volunteer firehouse was in the second floor meeting hall, we built the obstacle course that the fire department was using. So we were practicing like every day, because you have to be in good shape, but there's also some technique involved.
Oh, for sure.
So we were doing that. The most disheartening thing in the physical test was you had to finish, the last event was a mile run. And I ran a 6-minute mile, which I thought was pretty good. A guy lapped me twice. I was, and you don't know what your time is until you finish. So I found out it was a 6-minute mile, and he went past me twice. So this guy was like on record time.
Yeah, probably a runner in his downtime. That was probably nothing to him.
Little thin guy.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, I hear you. I'm a smaller guy myself. I'm only about 135, so technique is everything. I can move a hose line, I can throw a ladder, but again, sometimes especially if it's a roof ladder, it's a matter of where you're taking your leg locks. So little nooks like that can really help you to where strength is important. If you have it, you have it, but you don't necessarily have to be a bodybuilder to be effective. So as we'll talk about tonight. So getting on in 79, I mean, I know from talking with guys for a while up until recently, academy now for the FDNY is 18 weeks. Back then, it was only like 7 or 8. It flew 6 in your case. Wow, it flew by like that. You were in the firehouse.
You got on the first few weeks. We're just getting settled in, and then you really just learn the basics. Using a an air mask, stretching a line, basically forcing a door, raising a ladder. Didn't spend a lot of time on anything else, So you really learned once you got into the firehouse. And it was pretty busy in 79. So I went to the South Bronx, and you learned pretty quick. It didn't take too long to have your first fire. What helped me a lot was being a volunteer. I had been a volunteer 3 years before I got on the job. Best advice I ever got was from a friend of mine, Jack Theobald. He ended up retiring out of Rescue 1. And he said, when you go to the fire academy, if you know something, never say, I know. Worst 2 words you can ever say. Just nod your head and look smart, but don't tell them you know how to do it. Don't tell them you were a volunteer. Just take it all in. And it was good. But I had been in smoke. I had been in fires. So it took away some of the jitters. But still, this is the New York City, fire department. This is the major leagues.
Right.
So.
No, and those jitters are definitely there for somebody who's never gone through it. But at the same time, and listen, they know you're a volunteer. They did their background on you, so they know your background and where you're coming from. But
they didn't know.
Oh, they
They
didn't.
don't, I
Surprisingly.
don't think they checked. No.
Oh,
No.
yeah.
You were in there. Everybody's the same. A lot of time was spent on building teamwork.
Oh, okay.
You're not an individual. You're part of a team.
100%.
If there was any discipline, it was done on a team level, a squad level. So, it broke you down.
Yeah, break you down to build you up. It's kind of like that old military philosophy, and it applies to a paramilitary organization, especially one like the FDNY. And the interesting part about it, too, I mean, to your point is, even if you know how to do it or you have a good knowledge on how to do it, there's the FDNY way. You may have done it the volunteer way. All right, here's how you're going to learn how to do it in New York City. So taking a hydrant, of course, pumping a lot. It's all different in the FDNY.
How you carry your tools, everything.
Mm-hmm. Everything.
This is the way you're doing it. They don't care where you were before.
Mm-hmm.
And you would still see guys come into probie school with their volunteer fire chief's car. And I just shook my head, and you say, don't they have any friends to tell them don't do that?
Yeah, it's a bad idea. It's a bad
mistake. Yeah, you're setting yourself up for ridicule. One of the best things, one of the things they told us that really hit home was, if you graduate probie school and nobody knows your name, you did pretty good.
Yep. Invisible man or woman. That's the best place to be. We're talking with retired FDNY Captain Nick Gaudiosi here in the Mike to New Haven podcast. This is volume 78 of the best of the bravest interviews with the FDNY's lead. Shout out to our friends tuning in tonight in the chat. Before I continue, John Costello, Chris Ebden, who I mentioned earlier, James 5022, good to see you, buddy. Billy Meyer tuning in via Facebook. Pat Pogan, retired emergency service cop out of New York City, worked in Truck 2 for 12 years, was also a volley out in the island. It's good to see you, my friend. Hope you're feeling better these days. And I think that's Brian Keller in the chat. If it ain't Brian Keller, it's Brian Coundry. It's one of you guys. YouTube changed up the username, so it's hard to tell. So it's interesting mentioning going to the Bronx out of the academy, because the first 5 years before you get transferred over to Brooklyn in 84 were spent there. And I called this the Dennis Smith era, because he really brought the South Bronx to not only nationwide, but worldwide attention with Report from Engine Company 82. And during that time, the South Bronx, out of all the neighborhoods in the city that was burning the most, it was that section of the city that was going up in smoke. Maybe Brooklyn was a close second, but the South Bronx, and no offense to Brooklyn, had them beat by a country mile back then. So 45 engine for the first couple of years before you were strictly truck work the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Those 2 years in 45, how many runs were we talking a tour?
Oh, man. We did well over 5,000 runs a year.
Wow.
Which was nothing, because the guys that were there told me, oh, you should have been here. You missed it, kid. You should have been here a few years ago. One year they did 10,000 runs.
Wow.
They were they never got off the rig. It was good. It was good going back to the Bronx. I was close to the neighborhood I grew up in, close to the area. We ran in with 82 engine. And actually, my first lieutenant, Jack Main, is in the book.
Yeah.
Is in, because he worked in 31 truck as a firefighter. I had read Report from Engine 82. when it first came out. I think I was maybe still in high school, and still didn't make me think about becoming a fireman. Gave me a respect for what the New York City firefighters did. And living in the Bronx, I had a chance to see a few fires.
Right.
So
You mentioned that. Yep.
I could watch it. I would go up on the roof of the building we lived in, and there was a row of buildings across the street. And it seemed like every few months there was a fire in one of the buildings. And I would go up on the roof and watch the show.
And back then, we're talking vacants. We're talking squatters.
No, those were occupied buildings.
Arson for profit, too, I was going to say.
Yeah, a lot of behind 45 engine, you open up the back door of the kitchen, and all you saw were vacant 5-story apartment houses. We called it the land of vacant buildings.
Yeah, that's what it was back then. And it was burning down left and right. And even though it was decay financially and aesthetically for the city at the time, the silver lining to it is if you were a firefighter during that era, it was a lot of experience. You were learning on the fly. And I mean, I always quote this because Bobby Gaglione of Rescue 2 talked about this on this program a number of years ago. You could have, and this was true, like I said, of Brooklyn too, you could have had a fire at 6:30 at night where you screwed something up. You could have, and you said to yourself, dang it, I wish I would have done this instead of that. By 8:15 of the same night, you would have corrected that mistake. The calls were such coming in during that time, especially where you were working. You had a chance to learn and correct anything on the fly. You didn't have to wait.
Right. You got a lot of practice, a lot of the men I worked with when I first got on were Vietnam vets, and which was, they took you under their wing and they looked out for you and they taught you what was important and what wasn't important. The shirt you wore, not important. Doing your job, having your tools, that's important. So they looked out for us. And they had a poise about them. I mean, this is what I used to say. When I graduated high school, I went to college. These men, when they graduated high school, they went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
They spent, maybe a year or a couple of years in Vietnam. Then they got out of Vietnam and they were lucky enough to get on the New York City Fire Department during the war years. And when it was crazy. And now I'm coming in after that. And they're like, relax, kid, we got it. So they had this poise about them that you couldn't help but, after a while, it made you very comfortable with them around you going into a fire.
Yeah, I mean,
they had each other's back.
Exactly. They had seen so many things go down between overseas and combat and obviously New York City. I mean, even though obviously they understood the dangers of their job as New York City firefighters during that era, compared to Vietnam, it must have felt like a cakewalk to those guys.
Yeah. When they first got on, they were fighting vacant building fires like every other building.
Yeah.
When I got on, it's a vacant building. We got the X on the outside. We're putting up the tower ladder, and unless it's a small fire, we're not going in there. Only if it was small. And we did 45 engine. We had a lot of fires, and I think it was a while before I had a fire in an occupied building. Most of it was using the Clorox bottle of rope to go up, haul the line up, put it out, and get out of there. If it was any size, then we would let the tower ladders go to work, because they had lost a lot of men during the early 70s.
Yes.
And it was like, it's not worth it. What are we saving? So, we were still, doing an aggressive interior attack, but they knew enough to back off. Like, there was that risk reward,
Right. I mean, if we're talking a place that we know is a residential occupied, you got families in there, whole different ballgame. If it's a vacant and somebody probably said it, rather have been one of the junkies that's squatting in there, or rather have been arson for profit, but nobody's there.
Yeah.
Why lose a guy? And it's not even the guys losing, that were lost in the buildings. How many guys got killed or seriously injured and had their careers ended? Malicious pulls in the alarm box. They're on the way to the call. They get into a wreck on the way. Guy
These
falls off the rig.
Were in bad shape. I mean, a lot of the plumbing had been ripped out. Stairs are gone. You're walking up on the springers of the stairs. You're looking out for holes in the floor. What they did provide was a good training ground. You want to trim a window, you go in, you tear the window out. You want to pull ceilings, pull ceilings. I learned to cut a roof by cutting a roof in a vacant building, on drill. We go out, there's a building, let's cut it up.
Yeah.
So you got to really practice, which that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean, and even taking vacant cars in the street,
Oh,
and
yeah.
using them for extrication training. You can't so much as do that anymore either.
When we first got Hearst tools, we were driving down the street and saw an ADV. We'd stop and rip it apart. And then the DOT started saying, no, you can't do that because when they come to take it away, it falls apart.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, that is the drawback to it too.
yeah, practice wherever you can.
Yeah, get your reps in, stay sharp, And I
Exactly.
will say, I mean, again, especially on an engine company where you're stretching that nozzle in, you were doing a lot of that, and you were doing a lot of that not only in your own first do area, but you were also doing plenty of it, of course, like you said, running in with other companies on these boxes. Where even as a second do or a third do, you're going to see a lot. Now, when you went to 37 truck, were you going across the floor in 81?
No.
A different house.
37 truck was in another battalion.
Okay.
Still in the Bronx, still in the same division. 37 truck at the time. It's on Briggs Avenue in Bedford Park.
Okay.
That area, fully occupied area, like really no vacant buildings. And the work was starting to pick up. And a friend of mine from the hockey team was in the company. And when I was looking for a truck, I didn't want to move across the floor because a lot of guys had done it. And sometimes there was some hard feelings about moving over. But I didn't want to stay in an area that was predominantly vacant buildings. So 37 truck was occupied, so I went over there, and it was great. Great job, caught some work. And my first captain in 37, it was Bernie Cassidy, who was also a firefighter in 31 truck and also in Report from Engine 82. In Report from Engine 82, they call him Barney. Bernie Cassidy.
Okay. Yeah.
So, a lot of the beginning of my career, I was learning from the guys that were in Dennis's book.
Real life superheroes.
A lot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, that was the Bronx was burning back then. I always go back, and I didn't live through it, but it's on YouTube, and YouTube might as well be a time capsule these days. It's either the 1977 or 78 World Series. I think it's 78, game 3 or 4.
Oh, yeah. In the outfield, you can see the smoke.
You can see the smoke. So they pan out. The series is on ABC. It's the Dodgers against the Yankees. It's one of those 2 years because they played each other back to back. And you hear Howard Cosell, that distinctive Cosell voice, as I get ready to do my terrible Cosell impression. Would you look at that, folks? The Bronx is burning. And that kind of was a encapsulation of what the borough and really
should have been there 5 years earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an everyday occurrence. You always heard the fire sirens. You always saw smoke. It was not uncommon to, see that going on. The neighborhood I lived in, we saw some fires, but not too many, except for that one row of buildings across the street from me. But it was everyday occurrence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it may sound messed up to say, but for guys like yourself that lived through it as a firefighter and guys that, gals that were living in the neighborhood during that time, you didn't look at it really in the moment as decay. It was just Tuesday, for as messed up as that may sound, it was just another day.
I had an uncle who lived on the second floor of a building, and somebody on the top floor set fire to the apartment. However, burned through the roof, collapsed, water destroyed his apartment. So I saw that firsthand. The apartment house I lived in, there was a fire in an apartment. We didn't get any damage in my apartment, but we got filled up with smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And this was when I was still in high school. And so I was late getting to high school, which was Cardinal Hayes High School down by Yankee Stadium.
Yep.
So I get to school late, and I had to go to the dean's office because I was late. And I walk in, and he wants to know why I was late. And I said, well, there was a fire in my building. And he didn't believe me. I stunk like smoke. And I said, smell my clothes. I'm like, I didn't make this up. But,
yeah,
you deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's just how it was back then. Now, a little bit of a compare and contrast here, because 45 engine, you're either making the hydrant or you're humping the line in there with your lieutenant and your hydrant guy once he's all set to go. Pump operators, of course, is 9 times out of 10, depending on who your officer is going to usually stay with the piece unless it gets really bad. Then he goes in. But when you went to 37 truck, if you remember, from all the boxes in 45, what was your first box like in the Bronx 37, where now you're on the other side of operations and you're doing the truck work?
It wasn't that much different because when I was in 45, I had a mutual partner. We did mutuals. And then he transferred over to 58 truck across the floor. And when I had a year on the job, the captain of the truck let me still work mutuals with him. So I would work. I know. I don't know why he did that. And I don't.
It worked out though.
But I worked like 1 tour in the engine and 1 tour in the truck. Like my second year in 45 engine. Nobody seemed to mind. And so I was doing truck work before I went to 37. So going over there, the only difference was 58 truck was a tower ladder and 37 was a rear mount with the telephone booth.
Yeah. I mean, that's sorry, go ahead.
Well, that's an experience riding in. When you first get in the truck and you have the can position, you ride in the telephone booth. You're by yourself on the side of the truck. You know, a little different. Doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's another bygone part of a bygone era. And that's so, listen, that's the thing. When you went then, and I didn't know that. I'm glad you added that. When you went to 37, truck work wasn't unfamiliar to you, much like going into fires and being in those type of situations wasn't unfamiliar to you. When you went to the academy, this wasn't unfamiliar to you either because you were doing those mutuals. And
yeah, I was very prepared to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks to that captain letting you do those mutuals in the truck, it sets you up for success. So maybe that's the reason, if you ever wanted to go to the truck one day, he didn't want you to feel left out. Maybe.
Yeah. One of the biggest things first things they told me when I was in 37 truck and I worked a lot with the captain, Bernie Cassidy, was they said, when you work with the captain, you better wear sneakers. They said, because when he's off the rig, he's gone and you better be right behind him.
Yep.
So you learn pretty quick that there's no easing into the response, which is the way it should be.
Exactly. Not at all. I mean, it's fast. It's pedal to the metal. And that's any era. It doesn't matter if it's the Warriors. It doesn't matter when. It's always pedal to metal when there's a legit working fire going on.
Right. Now, like, to go back to Jack Maine and Bernie Cassidy coming out of 31 truck, you would think these guys had so much experience, maybe they wouldn't spend a lot of time on training. They were the most training-focused officers I might have ever worked with. And it wasn't so much as having a formal drill, but we talked about stuff all the time. We're in the kitchen having coffee. We're talking about things. They're asking about this. What would you do here? And so it was just constantly part of your day. You get up to the apartment door. Okay, what floor are we on? Where's exposure 1? Where's exposure 2? It's like you're thinking all the time. That's what they taught us to do in the truck. Think all the time, know where you are, how are you getting out? It really, as a new guy on the job, my first 4.5 years in the Bronx, it was really a great way to break into it's the right way. It makes it, not taking anything easy, not taking anything for granted. And they did that to everybody, not just me. So it didn't matter, if you transferred in from a company and had 6 years on the job, they were treating you the same.
Yeah.
So it was good.
It levels the playing field, which ultimately is fair for everyone and allows for that humbling. Not that somebody walks in arrogant per se, but at least it lets you know where you stand off the rip and working your way up from there. Now, not to gloss over them because I'm going to get to 124 truck and go into Brooklyn in a moment. But you mentioned the drills, informal or formal or otherwise. Right. How much of that did you take with you when you ended up making lieutenant originally in 88?
Oh, a lot of it. When I was in 37, Bernie asked me, because I could draw, to make up on oak tag, like draw out buildings, like an apartment house, a taxpayer, private house, things like that. And we would use that for drill, because if you're sitting in the kitchen talking about a drill in an apartment house, everybody's got a different picture in their head. But if we're all looking at the same picture, and it was behind plexiglass, and you can mark it up with a grease pencil where the fire is, where you would put a ladder. I thought it was a great idea. So after I made a set for him, I had, when I was in the Bronx, started thinking about studying for promotion. So I made a second set for myself. And when I was covering lieutenant, I would carry that around with me and give a drill. So, yeah, you take from everybody you know.
Yeah. It's bits and pieces that ultimately add to the puzzle and make you as well-rounded as you can be. Even if you never move up in the ranks, even if you just stay a firefighter, it's going to make you a heck of a senior guy for people coming into the firehouse to be able to learn from. Because, again, you're adept, you're keeping your ears out, you're keeping your eyes out, you're picking up as you go. You never stop learning, as you well know.
Well, I had those different building drawings with, in a frame with the plexiglass. And I always had it with me when I was covering, and then when I got my permanent assignments. And I took it with me to Ladder 7. And this past September 11th, I was at the firehouse, and those drawings are still in the firehouse kitchen.
Wow.
I don't know if they use them anymore, but they're still in the kitchen. And, oh, geez, they've got to be 40 years old.
Yeah. I mean, listen, and again, that speaks to tradition. And there's nothing like it, especially in the New York City Fire Department. The bigger the agency, the bigger the mission it is to keep those traditions safeguarded. Now, again, New York City, the history of it's interesting overall, where we're talking 5 cities that were essentially merged into one. Brooklyn, for example, is the 4th on its own, not even counting the larger city it's a part of. If you just take Brooklyn itself, it's the 4th largest city in America, population-wise. And borough to borough, the approach is different. How you fight fires in Manhattan is different than how it is in the Bronx. It's different to how it is in Brooklyn and Queens and Staten Island. To that point in your career, all you knew was the Bronx. I mean, again, and even though you were going to another truck company, I should say, in 124 and 84, so the work is pretty much the same, maybe the approach is a little bit different in Brooklyn. So if it was, tell me about, again, the change, or was there minimal change when you went to 124?
No, it's different. In the Bronx, it was, originally vacant buildings, apartment houses, some taxpayer fires, 37 truck, occupied apartment houses, a few private dwellings, and some taxpayers. Brooklyn, different story. Row frames. Bushwick was blocks and blocks of row frames. Fires burned through them pretty quick. So you had to move. In the Bronx, unless it was a top floor fire, you didn't really have to cut the roof. In Brooklyn, it was 4-story row frames. You're getting up there and you're cutting the roof. Just about every fire. You had to move, and sometimes you had to give up a building and go down a couple in the row. So a lot different. And we had a lot of factories in Bushwick too. So those were no fun because big open floor plans, you could easily get lost in them. So it was different. And 124 was a tower ladder. So it was back to being in a tower ladder.
Yeah, not so much a tiller, which again, a tiller is not any particularly easy assignment either. I've had guys on the show who have driven those. If you're in the back of the tiller driving that thing, it's a science, it's an art form. But the tower ladder, when it comes to, were you guys operating deck guns back then, or was that a little bit later on in the game?
In the tower ladder?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sunrise over Bushwick. You had the bucket up in the air overnight. And, some building burned to the ground and you're up in the bucket, pouring water on some building and, watching the sunrise.
Yeah. Well, listen, what could be better? So, in line with that, with the changeover, and I'm glad I asked that question, even though the concept stayed the same because you were a truck guy for a while by this point, having done it for the couple of years in 37 in the Bronx, Brooklyn-wise, with what you just mentioned, how long would you say that it take to get adjusted to the Brooklyn way of doing truck work?
I don't think it took too long because we were catching a lot of work in 124.
Gotcha.
Again, over 5,000 runs a year. One of the busiest companies, a lot of occupied structural work. And the guys there were pretty good teachers too. Again, they took you on their wing. They taught you, they didn't leave anything to chance. Again, we sat around the kitchen and we talked fires. We talked about different buildings. We talked about fires that they had on a previous tour. So they taught you how to do things. You picked up pretty quick. Row frames are a lot different than apartment houses, so you have to treat them differently. But even while you were in the fire and doing overhaul, they would be teaching. So I really, during all my time, I was a firefighter before I was promoted lieutenant for 9 years. And I basically just kept my mouth shut and my ears open and took it in from these five. In 124, there were guys that had 20, 25 years in 124 working in Bushwick. Went through all those war years, gained a ton of experience, saw a lot of, friends get hurt, and passed on that knowledge to us. So I was part of like a second wave of guys coming through.
Yeah, and that sets you up for success in your own right. Because where you are in 1988, when you make lieutenant, is an interesting spot. You're still young on the job, but you're approaching a decade on it. So it's not like by now you haven't seen everything, but you've been around the block a couple times at this point in your career. So it's a sweet spot for you. Making lieutenant, you were covering for a while in Queens. Before I get to you being permanent for, even though it's just a year, in 136, were you bouncing around specifically as a UFO in truck companies, or did you do a little bit of engine work?
Yeah, do a little bit of everything.
Okay.
I never really bounced too long. A few months, and then a spot opened up in 136, long-term medical, and the chief of the firehouse in the 4-6 Battalion, Marty Hughes, was a hockey fan. Actually, the three Hughes brothers in the NHL are his grandsons.
Yeah, I heard about that. I'm trying to get, is Chief Hughes still with us?
Yes.
I'm trying to get him on the show. I've been trying to look back for that guy, forever.
Those are his grandsons.
Yeah.
But he was a hockey fan. I was on the hockey team. And I guess he took a liking to me and asked me if I wanted to. And also, I came from a busy ladder company. Would want the spot in to cover in 136 UFO. So that was great. It was catching some good work, good group of guys. Just to start off, when I got promoted lieutenant, I didn't go to lieutenant school. At that time, they put you right in the field. So I got promoted on Thursday. On Saturday, I'm working in 154 truck in Queens. Basically, I changed my shirt and I'm a lieutenant. And the only thing what really helped me was I had been an officer in the Long Beach Volunteer Fire Department. So I had that little experience on a smaller scale of leading guys into fires. But I was an officer in an engine company in Long Beach. But so, I studied, and the biggest thing you fall back on is the officers you worked with before, the lieutenants and the captains that I worked under, about how you handle yourself. Because Queens was a different animal also. That area, apartment houses, private houses, taxpayers. So things I had been used to, because in Long Beach it's all private homes.
I was going to say it's kind of the same layout.
A few apartment houses, yeah. So I had fires in all those places. So it was nothing out of the ordinary.
And it wasn't long, but even though you weren't in Queens, for too long before you ended up going back to the Bronx in 90, you took a little bit of that too, to where you went to next, and it all kind of added together. And I imagine, I'm not going to jump ahead too far because we'll hit it a little bit later. I do want to get back to going to the Bronx in a moment, but you took that with you when you were down at the academy from 96 to 97, even though it was, again, a little stint compared to the longer stints you had. All that was in your mind during that period of time down at the academy and kind of crafting things down there.
Yeah, well, we were asked at the time, Eddie Garrity was asked to take over Proby School, head up Proby School. The head of Proby School had just retired around 96. We had lost a few guys, and they started a back to basics program because we were losing guys in, not truss construction, not new construction, the bread and butter buildings that are in New York City. So they started a back to basics training program. Then Eddie was running that. Then he was asked to take over Proby School. and the mandate was make it better.
And he did.
Make it better. And he asked me to be his executive officer. And we sat down and just looked at the curriculum and said, what could we do to make it better? And at the time, they were getting a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with putting out fires, fire prevention stuff, building inspection stuff. That's stuff you can learn in the firehouse.
Right.
You know? The hands-on stuff in the Proby school was lacking. There wasn't enough of it. So we changed the whole curriculum, actually added, I think it was like 63 hours of, and Proby school was longer than 6 weeks, 63 hours of hands-on training, and didn't add 1 day to the program by cutting out some of the BS and repeating classes. Just one thing comes to mind. The Proby class, prior to us changing it, did the mass confidence course once. They basically got through it. You know, we implemented it 3 times, because the first time they went through it, maybe half of them failed. The second time they went through it, everybody passed. It was a little harder. The third time through, everybody breezed through. And one of the probies actually said to us, why are we doing this? It's too easy. Point was,
mistake.
Well, yeah. But our point was, the course didn't get easier. You got smarter. You got more experience.
Right.
The whole point of the mass confidence course is to instill confidence in them that they can handle a mask emergency, low air, getting hung up on something, crawling through a tight space. So if you put them through it once and they're just happy to get through, we felt they didn't have the confidence. By the third time, we figured if it's too easy, then it served our purpose.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way to look at it. And I smile when you mention Chief Garrity. And both him and his brother aren't with us anymore. So his brother died a couple of years ago in 9/11 cancer. Chief Garrity, Ed Garrity, that is, because they were both chiefs, was killed on 9/11. And I remember reading in his obituary, and this is why I smile. And it kind of speaks volumes to the kind of guy he was. One day, the probies come in around this time he took over, and he talks to them. He gives them a nice little short to the point speech about his expectations. You know, he's very easygoing. He just tells them, all right, we're going to get after it. This is what I expect of you. And the probies kind of smile. All right. And they walk out of the room. And the guys that are in the room with him as the instructors are looking at Chief Garrity like, what's wrong with you? And he goes, what'd I do? He's like, you're supposed to scare the hell out of them.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Plenty of times he did. Eddie was a tall guy and had an imposing, stature. And if a probie needed to be tightened up, that we would send him to see Captain Garrity, and Eddie would stand up at his full height and scowl at the kid and call him on the carpet. No, Eddie could do that too.
Yeah, he wore both hats.
Got to know Eddie and Stevie very well. Stevie and I got promoted lieutenant together the same day.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and they both had very distinguished careers in the FDNY. Yes. Very distinguished careers.
Really put their fingerprints all over the fire academy.
Mm-hmm. Still being felt to this day. Still being felt this day from both guys. Billy Gross, hello to you, my friend in the chat. He was on the show a little while ago, a couple months ago, and he says Billy worked on the FDNY EMS side, and he says Ed was a good man, R.I.P. He was. Both him and his brother Steve, like I said, both unfortunately, and they're in different ways. 9/11 took both from us, sadly, but their legacy certainly lives on. So, not that you didn't enjoy Queens, you certainly grew to enjoy Queens, even though it was brief. You enjoyed Brooklyn too for the 5 years you were in 124. But was there a part of you when you got to 38 and 90 that said, I'm back home?
Yeah, I would have been very happy in 136 truck, but when the order came up, I had the endorsements of the captain and the chief, and then a lieutenant who was getting promoted captain in 6 months outpointed me, and he took the spot in 136. So I would have been very happy staying there, but when I didn't get it and I was going to be bouncing again, there weren't as many companies I wanted to work in the 14th Division. And I had wanted to go to the Bronx when I first got promoted anyway. I mean, I originally went out to Brooklyn so I could get promoted and go back to the Bronx. And then it didn't work out that way. They sent me to Queens. So I figured, well, I didn't get the spot in 136. let me go back to the Bronx, the 7th Division, a lot of good companies. Be very happy, even bouncing there for a while. And then again, after just a few months, spot opened up in 38 Truck, and I was asked to take that spot long term. And that was actually in the neighborhood I grew up in.
Oh, so it really was a homecoming.
Oh, it was. I mean, when I was a little kid, I lived just a few blocks away. And this is even going back. My brother always wanted to go to, who's a couple of years older than me, always wanted to go to the firehouse, see the fire trucks. And I'd be the kid tagging along with them. The fire department didn't have a draw for me until I got into volunteers. So literally was like my neighborhood firehouse, 38 Truck. So it was fun working there. And when I went back there as a lieutenant, there were a handful of firefighters in 38 who were firefighters in 45 engine. We were all probies together in 45 engine. So it was very comfortable going there. And 38 was a very senior house. So again, new lieutenant, even though I had a couple of years under my belt, knew the area, but senior firefighters who they knew me, they were senior firefighters when I was a probie. So, and I had worked in that firehouse, so they knew me from there. And but they treated me like a lieutenant, and they gave me the respect. And and then you do your best to earn it.
Yeah, I mean, because that could go, and that's nice that you said that, because that can go either way. I mean, it depends on how you carry yourself, right? It could either it could see you walk and be like, really, this guy? Okay, yeah. But don't worry, we'll do what he says, in theory, but behind his back, we'll do X, Y, and Z instead. Or it could go the way you said, where, you know what, hey, we're going to treat him as such until he gives us a valid reason not to. He's our lieutenant, and we're going to give him the due respect. You never gave him a valid reason. They respected you, and that's great.
There were firefighters there, and they, like I said, they respected the rank. But if I screwed something up, they would have no problem walking over privately and saying, hey, don't do that again. Or that may not have been the best thing. It never happened. But there was no doubt in my mind that, they would let you know.
Yeah. And you need that. It keeps you honest. It keeps you accountable.
Right. Hold you accountable. And as it should be.
Yeah.
The fire department doesn't have a sergeant's rank. But going back to 37 Truck, when I first got there, the chauffeurs wore collar pins that were sergeant's bars. And I wondered why. And they said, well, they're the senior man. They're like a non-com. And you listen to them. And you know what? The best firehouses I worked in, the chauffeurs, the senior men, they would have first line of supervision before you even got to the lieutenant. That a lot of those guys, they were like a sergeant. They would keep guys in line. And because a lot of officers, you transfer, you come and go, you get promoted. You get those firefighters that are in a company 20, 25, 30 years. That's the stability of the company. And you need that. And I think It's a little lacking today.
Yeah, because the job has gotten a lot younger too, and it's not to say that the young guys don't care. We're not saying that at all. It's just with the change in age and your senior guy, having maybe 10 years in the job, but also being 32 years old because he got on the job so young himself. Maybe a little bit of those traditions. I mean, I don't want to go as far as to say they've been forgotten because I think that's too far, but they've been altered a bit, and that's something where you gotta
that those senior men with 25 years. Had kids the ages of the probies coming on the job.
Right.
So, they didn't treat you like a baby, but they treated you like one of their kids. And they treated you like a father would treat you. And I think that's the best tradition of the fire.
Yeah. And there's something that was said in another program. Mickey Farrell, shout out to him, Top Floor Tactics. He's currently still on the job as a lieutenant at a truck company in the Bronx, where he said, pulling up, because he started his career right after 9/11 in 2001. But even before that, as a volunteer in New Jersey, you go into the firehouse, you see certain cars in the parking lot, and that tells you, crap, okay, I got to make sure I'm on my best behavior today because this guy's working. I don't want to let him down. There's still that in the fire service, but I feel like it's drawn back a bit, which is dangerous, I feel.
It'll even out over time.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. The pendulum always swings
Well,
back
we
and forth.
just, 9/11, you lost almost a generation of guys
Yeah.
in a short period of time, from the guys who died, the guys who got sick, but also guys who retired earlier because maybe the pension was good, that
Yeah.
they couldn't give up the overtime, and maybe retired sooner than they wanted to. So you lost a lot of guys that would have slowed down promotions, people getting on the job. It would have lengthened out the careers.
Right. Yeah. 2001 to 2003. Same thing with the NYPD around this time frame, too. A lot of guys who had really been there and done that for both departments. Port Authority Police can speak to the same thing, given their losses that day, too. So many valuable guys. It wasn't just the guys that got killed, to your point. It was the guys that left because of emotional strain. But what you said with the pensions looking good, a lot of time got added to the pension. And they felt, you know what? Listen, one guy told me straight up, I'll never forget him saying this in the program. I didn't die in this one. Do I really want to hang around and get killed in the next one? That was part of it too. And that's another reason why guys left. And we'll get that in a little bit because we'll talk about some of the guys that didn't come back that day from 7 Truck. But that being said, of course, and I'll get to making captain in 94. Brief spell too in 32 Truck. A lot of the same work you were seeing in 38, or was it a little bit different?
Yeah. Well, in 38, I kind of ran up against the same thing. Spot opened up. I had everybody's endorsement, from captain to borough commander, and somebody else had the first deputy fire commissioner's endorsement. So they bumped me out. And I was bouncing again. And Jack Main, my old lieutenant from 45 Engine, was now Captain Jack Main up in 32 Truck. And I knew if he was up there, it was going to be a squared away company. And they had an opening, and I spoke to him and I put in for it. Good group of young guys, occupied area, work was picking up. Area was projects, apartment houses, taxpayers, private dwellings. So a good mix of buildings and good work. 32 Truck was a remount again. And enjoyed my time up there. And actually, of the 3 places that I was worked long term as a lieutenant, 32 Truck was the shortest. It was 15 months.
Yeah.
And then I got promoted.
So, given the fact that you were enjoying it, listen, obviously you were able to do some great stuff when you made captain. It opens up some more doors, as we're about to hit on. But given the amount of time you'd been in the Bronx overall to that point of your career, and you were having a nice time in 32, was there part of you that wanted to decline the promotion, say, you know what, I'm good here? Or were you just, were you happy to move forward?
No, I wanted to move forward.
Okay.
Nice to have your own company. I had been a lieutenant for 6 years. It seemed longer back then. 6 years now seems pretty short.
Yeah.
But no, I felt I was ready for it. As you think you are, as ready as you could be, going from a lieutenant and basically being in charge of your shift to now being in charge of the firehouse company. But and that was another thing. When I got promoted, I had been teaching at John Jay, the fire safety director's course. And I figured, high-rise fire safety. I said, well, I should go to Manhattan and get some high-rise experience if I'm going to teach this course. So I put in for the 3rd Division in Manhattan. So in the wisdom of the fire department, they sent me to Brooklyn, the 15th Division, which is great. Busy division. A lot of good companies. But again, it's like wherever I put in for, they sent me somewhere else.
Right. And it had a way, I guess, of evening out, after a while, to where at the end of it, it made sense. But originally, they had to be saying each time, it's like, I didn't want to go. Not that you didn't, like the assignment.
Believe me, I didn't hate going to the 15th Division.
Yeah, of course.
Great companies, a lot of work. So even bouncing around the 15th Division was interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So even if it wasn't what you had in mind, after a while, you look around and say, you know what? That worked out pretty good. I'm glad I ended up here.
Yeah. I worked there for just about almost 2 years. And then I did transfer to Manhattan. And then while I was right after I transferred to Manhattan, is when Eddie Garrity asked me to come out to the Fire Academy in 96.
Mm.
And then also in 96 is when the fire department started the master's program in fire protection management.
Was just about to ask you about that.
Yeah, at the fire academy. So it was good timing.
So let's touch on that now because you ended up graduating that in 1998. What was the reasoning and the motivation behind starting that?
I think the fire department was never done before, and it was 25 fire officers. Excuse me. 1 day a week, Wednesday nights from 6 to 10, taught at the fire academy. So we're all in one group for 4 hours together for 2 years. So I think part of it was to have us all go through and get the degree, but also as a good networking tool, bring us all together. And we had someone from every rank. We had a couple of lieutenants. Mike Gala, who is an assistant chief now, was a lieutenant. Richie Tobin, who was a deputy chief of fire prevention, I think he was a lieutenant at the time there. Eddie Garrity was a captain. I was a captain. Eddie Moriarty, a lot of guys that went on. We had Mike Cronin, assistant chief, Charlie Blake, battalion chief, a couple of deputy chiefs. So we had somebody in a few people in every rank among that 25 guys. Sometimes I think we learned as much from the other students as the instructors, who were great, but we had some fire officers with a lot of experience in that room. So we could debate things and learn. And we touched on all topics. It wasn't just fire safety. It was also some security in there, human resource management, some other topics in there. So a good learning experience, but also a great networking experience that a lot of us carried through even after we graduated.
Absolutely. It's something that kind of created the template for what you see now. Where again, it's not to say, you got guys that get on the job with just a GED and an associate's degree and they become great firefighters. But really, if you want to move forward in the FDNY, this is no knock on them. Having that degree doesn't define you per se. You still have to implement the skills in the street, but it doesn't hurt you either. And I think it's a good opportunity for a lot of guys, especially with John Jay's history of really kind of being a breeding ground for cops and for firefighters. Its links to public safety are very well known. That was a good stepping stone for guys because it was yet another opportunity the job was able to provide for guys that wanted to advance themselves, not only in their careers, but even after they retired, right? If they wanted to do something in the private sector, that was the ticket to do it. Or one of them.
Yeah, to me, working afterwards. But when we were in that course, one of the early courses was human resource management. And it was all about affecting change in an organization. And then it was like right after we finished that class, the next semester was when Eddie was asked to take over Proby School. So we sat down and we're coming from the same place. And we said, okay, we got out our textbook for the human resource management class. And we said, let's use this. And we used that as a basis for a lot of the changes we made in Proby School. When we got there, aside from the hands-on classes and everything, they would get 2 exams. They got a midterm and a final. That was it. Failed the final, it set them back. We implemented weekly tests, weekly quizzes. That way we could gauge their progress before they even got to a midterm. But it also let us know what they were learning and what they had a problem with. And we kept some classes unassigned. So we could say, okay, if they're having a problem with this topic, whatever it is, we can repeat it. We had an open class, we could plug it in. So we treated it more like a school. Really it was a little more work for us and the instructors, and it also, by taking those quizzes, we could look at who was teaching those courses. So it was a gauge on how the instructors were teaching too.
Yeah. Listen, you can't, and you see this a lot with bigger cities because again, you have the city kind of breathing down your neck and budget wise, and that can happen, in anywhere, any large enough city. You can't rush it either. It's important for them. Obviously, they're going to learn a lot of this stuff in the firehouse too, kind of to your point earlier. But a lot of this academic stuff is stuff they're going to carry with them throughout their careers too. It's not like, regular school where I can tell you this is yet another day, Cap, where I have not used the Pythagorean theorem for anything. So that's how far that gets. This is different. I mean, I always repeat this line, and Chief Tom Brennan once said it, former FDNY Chief of Department. You can never know enough about a job that can kill you. So this stuff is important to learn. And if instructors aren't able to convey it, which is just as important as recruits being able to retain it, at least that was the barometer, that was the measuring stick to say, okay, this instructor needs to improve, or he's doing really well. This recruit is struggling with this, or these recruits are really getting it.
Right. Also, we had at the time Lieutenant John Hughes, and back to basics, then move over to Proby School. John took the Proby manual, which they used to give you just a box of procedural manuals, right? And half the stuff the Probies didn't even need, but they would have to read it. We went through it, and he computerized it and cut it down to what they need to know in Proby School. They'll need all of it if they decide to study for lieutenant or they get into a truck company. But what do they need for Proby School? So he made it easier that we could do that. Plus a lot of different things. I mean, they were using overhead projectors and slides that were like 100 years old. And he started using PowerPoint. So a lot of different people had their hands in it. And, it's not like one guy made everything so much better.
Right.
A lot of people. John was in the master's degree program with us. So another graduate moving to make the job a little bit better, pushing that rock uphill, move it a little bit, and then the next guy move it a little more. And we were kind of coming from the same place. So we understood one another, could work with one another.
And to your point about, the evolution of tactics and teaching, you can't use, this is the mid-90s when you were down there, you can't use slides from the 60s and the 70s to apply to the 90s. The game's changed. That would have worked in the 60s and the 70s, but where the city was with and I talked about this in the last episode with Captain Elliott, where the city was with building construction, where the city was in terms of code, what type of fires you were seeing during that period, you had to make it relevant too, when you were there, 1996, 1997, 1998. You can't use anything from 1966, 1967, 1968.
No.
Not going to work. Not going to work. So very good point there. That moves us ahead into ladder 7. To this point in your career, I mean, I'm sure you've done a detail or two, or maybe gone in there on depending on the severity of an alarm for a fire. But being in Manhattan, by this point, 18 years in the job, you've been a lieutenant for 6, a captain for 3, you made captain in 94 and covered around in Brooklyn for a little bit, which was familiar territory for you given your time previously at 124. Again, we talked about the differences in boroughs earlier. Same type of company, right? You're still doing truck work. Do it
tower ladder.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, it's tower ladder, so I was familiar with the truck.
Yeah.
But you rarely use ladders in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Mostly all high-rise buildings. A few times you would get an apartment house fire where it was within the reach of the bucket, but most of the time we weren't using the rig. One of the first, and it's totally different. I had no experience in Manhattan in high-rise buildings, even though in 97, by the time I got there, I had been teaching the fire safety director's course for 4 years. I was doing a good job of faking it, teaching the fire safety director's course. So I had some knowledge about the buildings, but never had, really been in them. One of the first things I did was sit down with the guys in the kitchen and said, listen, you're the experts here, not me.
Right.
Like, you know these buildings, you know how we do things. What's the company policies? But if you see me doing something and you don't think it's going to work, let me know.
Tell me. Yeah.
Just because I'm, wearing 2 bars on my collar, don't think you can't talk to me. Let me know if I'm making a mistake. I'm not looking to get somebody hurt. So it worked out. And then, over time you gain some experience and things happen. Good company, a lot of young guys. We weren't going to as many fires as we were in the Bronx and Brooklyn, but a lot of emergencies, different things like subway emergencies, a ton of elevator emergencies, a lot of car crashes, and there's always a cab involved. Really. And responded to a seaplane flipped over in the river. We had stuff that, never had experience before, but got to be ready for everything.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it in Manhattan. You don't know what you're gonna get. I'm not gonna sit here and say that isn't the same for the other boroughs too, but it's kind of for the pretty. I don't want to say formulaic, but cut and dry. Most of the time, you can get thrown a curveball here and there. In the Bronx, you know what you're going to 9 times out of 10. Brooklyn, you know what you're going to 9 times out of 10
Right.
because of what we have in Manhattan and the differences in buildings. How Midtown is compared to Stuytown, for example, and or Inwood is a little bit
Right.
different. You can go to just about anything, different types of fires, different
You
types
could
of
have been
MBAs.
in this office building 5 times,
Yeah,
and now you're on a different floor, and it's totally different.
exactly. You just
So
don't know.
the difference between the Bronx and Brooklyn and even Queens and Manhattan is in those boroughs, you could rush in there. You could do things a little differently. Manhattan, because of the way the buildings are, you fight fires a little more by the book. You have to double up companies.
Hmm.
You can't go freelancing because you can't just jump out a window.
Yep.
It's very easy to get lost. Every time we went in, we're bringing a search rope with us. You get these floors, they're huge floors of cubicles, very easy to get turned around and not know where you are. So a little slower pace, but you fight them more by the book.
Yeah, I mean, there's precedent too. As you were saying that, I was thinking about the Macy's fire in '79, where a guy got killed in the line of duty that day. I forget his name
The
escapes
fire,
me.
uh, Smith from
Yeah.
Ladder 7. He was from
Yep.
Ladder 7.
Yeah, and again, he got disoriented and lost in the store.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he did anything wrong. I'm just saying a lot went wrong that day, unfortunately.
Well,
That
they
culminated
turned
in him
off
getting.
the sprinkler system and
Hmm.
didn't turn the valve back on, and a
Yep,
number of different things.
I think his name was Walter Smith, if I recall correctly.
No,
I'll look it up here and figure out what his name was. Stand by. I'm gonna find. Yeah, it was Walter Smith.
Walter Smith? I thought
Yeah,
it
it
was
was Walter
Richard
Smith.
Smith.
No, it says here Walter. Yeah, we. I remember hearing that name in Chief Jonas has a great newsletter. He revisited that fire as part of his newsletter, so that's where I remember seeing the name. And again, anything can go wrong in those buildings. So, and the fire load too. I remember talking about this with Ray McCormick because Ray worked for a long time in
Right.
24 and in Midtown, where you don't know what's in these buildings. It could be a record company, it could be an office building, it could just be a factory, right? You got your
Right.
warehouses in Manhattan.
Yeah, you have a lot of mixed use. It could be storage. It could be, like you said, a factory. You could go into a building, it's an office building, and there's a jewelry factory on the
Hmm.
floor, and they have
Art
gas.
studio.
Right. You really never know. So you played a little slower. The one good thing is these buildings have sprinklers, and you get a little. They rarely get out of control. Not that it hasn't happened, but
Right. Keeps it
um,
in check for the most part.
right, right. It's a little different.
Which is a big, big help. Hi to Billy Cooney in the chat. I didn't say hi to you earlier, my friend. Good to see you, brother, tuning in from Wisconsin. Now, OEM, and I wanted to hit on this with you too. OEM was really one of the Giuliani administration's great triumphs. And one of my regrets, because he died of cancer a couple of years ago, is not getting Jerry Hauer on the show, who's one of the
Yeah,
original
Jerry
guys.
Howard was great.
He was such a visionary. He did a hell of a job with OEM. And what's nice about OEM is that it blended the best of both badges. Blended guys from the NYPD, blended guys from the FDNY. Timmy Brown, for example, from Rescue 3 went to OEM and did some great work there. Steve Kerr on the FDNY EMS
Yep.
side went there too
Yep.
and worked there for a while. So I believe Billy Gross had a little bit of a hand in that too for a period of time in the chat. So again, brilliant invention, kind of, was able to streamline operations between PD and FD when Giuliani brought into effect in 96. And it seems silly now, but 1999 to 2000, people didn't know what was going to happen when the clock struck
Yeah.
midnight on December 31st, 1999. Nobody had lived through a millennium before. And unless a magic potion comes out, we're not going to live through one again. So tell me about the coordination that went on with OEM during that time.
Well, at that time, John Hughes had left Proby School and taken a detail to OEM. He was a deputy commissioner at OEM under Jerry Hauer. And John was put in charge of citywide contingency planning for Y2K. So again, John was in the class with us. One of the classes we took in the master's program was emergency management. And John was looking for somebody to come over and give him a hand at OEM. And one day I'm in ladder 7 and a car pulls up on the street and it's John Hughes and Jerry Hauer. And Jerry's recruiting me to go work for him at OEM. So I really wasn't looking to leave the company. So I told him, I'll give you 6 months. I'll give you till like February of 2000, and I'll come and work with John. And that's what it was all about. And to tell you the truth, I never thought Y2K was going to be the end of the world. You know, they were talking about
computer outages,
working, no electricity, planes falling out of the sky. And even back then, I thought, like, they didn't know what was going to happen when the computers had to roll over to 2000. And even back then, I was thinking, why don't they just take a computer, change the date, like in March of 1999, to make it December, and let's see what happens when it hits 2000.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody was doing that. So there were two things going on. One was getting Y2K compliant computers in the city. The other was under Giuliani and Jerry Hauer, where the city has to function no matter what happens. So we were working with all the city agencies to put contingency plans together. And it wasn't only Y2K focused. It was like a lot of other things happen in New York City. Strikes, hurricanes, snowstorms, water main breaks, you name it. Stuff happens, and we got to be ready to deal with it. So that's what we were focusing on. And we had a team of IBM consultants who were helping us work through the process of getting these plans together. So we had to do it, and we had a hard end date. You know, it's December 31st. Either we're ready or we're not. So we're going through this, and I was the assistant under John, and we had Pete Petrillo, who was a sergeant in the PD. He was the other assistant under John, and we were overseeing the other trainers doing the work of getting these plans together. And I had 5 agencies who were the most reluctant to comply. And they just weren't buying into the whole Y2K, BS.
Of course.
But we would have a meeting every couple of weeks or month with Deputy Mayor Joe Loda and Giuliani. And he wanted to know, is anybody being, resistant? And we would say, yeah. And they would get a phone call, and then we get a little more cooperation. But I sat down with each commissioner individually. And I said, and they were like, I'm not buying it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what? I agree with you. I don't think that's happening. But we got to be ready for other stuff. So, it was things like, if the water main breaks outside your building and you can't get into your offices, what are you going to do? Send everybody home, or are you going to work from somewhere else? And what do you need to work from somewhere else? What, do you need computers? Do you need files? Do you need things, right?
Yeah.
Where can you go? Do you have an agreement with another agency to work from their office? If you had a fire in your building and you can't get in, what are you going to do? If there's a strike. So it wasn't only Y2K focused. And one of the good things about it, like Y2K came and went and nothing happened. And I'll tell you a story about that night in a second. But the benefit of that exercise of putting those plans together for Y2K was a year later when they were used for 9/11, because a lot of city agencies were displaced from lower Manhattan, and they had those plans to fall back on. So that was good to see. But at OEM, Jerry was a great boss, but Jerry was a big fire buff.
He certainly was, yes.
He lived in Riverdale, and we would have a meeting every Monday morning. And if Jerry wasn't there, it was usually because he was buffing a fire in the Bronx or somewhere. But he was a great boss to work with. Really supported us. Very knowledgeable. But for Y2K, we activated, and we had other things going on at the same time. Transit strike, the avian flu, the West Nile virus. We're dealing
terrorism
with that.
concerns.
There was a couple of snowstorms. So there was other things going on in the middle of all of that. But we activated the EOC 3 days prior to Y2K, prior to New Year's, just to get everybody in the habit of working 12-hour shifts and being there. A representative of every city agency. And the EOC at 7 World Trade Center looked like you would think it would look. Screens everywhere, access to all the cameras in the city. You needed to talk to the PD. You just walked over to the other side of the room. Government agencies, everybody was there. So you could get a lot done.
Yeah.
And then, we were all gearing up. Funny story, the night before New Year's, so December 30th, we're activated, we're in the EOC. A police officer comes up to the podium and says, listen, don't say anything. We don't want to scare anybody. But a tractor trailer just pulled up in front of the building and the driver walked away. And now we're thinking like Oklahoma City.
Yep.
Like, oh my God, somebody's going to blow up the EOC. Like, what the hell is going on? So, we didn't say anything. It was a tense few minutes. They had to get the bomb squad. And then he came back. I think it was about a half an hour later. And he tells us, don't worry, it was a truckload of furniture. The driver was driving it up from South Carolina. He got lost somewhere and just pulled up in front of 7 World Trade Center. Like, what are the chances?
Yeah.
Made sure the next night, the whole area was shut down. Nobody could get close to the building. And then another funny thing happened on December 31st. We would, Y2K happened the other side of the globe 24 hours earlier.
Australia.
So we're tracking around the world. We're watching, is anything going on? And we're seeing as midnight is hitting different time zones, and nothing really seemed to be happening. Minor little things, nothing of any consequence. But then, like, New Year's happens in New York, and like seconds after the ball dropped, the lights in the EOC go out. I mean, everything. The whole place went black. There was an audible gasp in the EOC. It was like, oh my God, this is real. Something happened. No, what really happened was Phil Paw, who was a battalion chief. Do you know Phil?
He's been on the show.
Been on the show?
Yeah.
Have him on again and ask him if he tells this story. He leaned the EOC had light settings. So instead of turning lights on and off, you hit did one setting, 2, 3, 4. He leans against the switch and shorts out the switch. And that would cause every light. Did he tell you that story?
No, he didn't.
Oh, okay.
He should have, though, because I know he was another OEM guy for a while.
Yeah, he was there. So he shorts out the EOC. There was this gasp. Ray Lynch, who was also a firefighter working there, knew where all the switches were. So he reset the circuit breakers and the lights went back on. But it was like we didn't think anything was happening. And then what timing Phil had, and I'm sure it wasn't on purpose, that he shorted out all the lights at one point. And then nothing happened, and we all went home the next day.
And it's worth noting, as if it's not chaotic enough, December 31st, 1999 is a Friday. So it's a Friday night in New York City. Everybody's out partying because of this event on top of that. So that's another. I mean, it's going to be crowded regardless, but especially knowing the next day, Saturday, and nobody really has to go to work.
Right.
Yeah. Can't even.
No, it was, it was an interesting detail being an OEM. I knew the fire department, but seeing how other city agencies interacted, what OEM could do, what it couldn't do.
Yep.
Everybody wanted a generator. And they thought, the Toro generator would power their building. Wasn't happening.
No, wasn't happening indeed. And I don't blame you for the truck thing, because think about it. It's not just Oklahoma City. What happened across the street? 93. So What are you thinking? You're thinking 93 too, and what Ramsey Youssef and his crew did. Right. God, I love these stories. I've often said, if time machines were real, the place I'd love to time travel back to, if it were possible to, like you see in the science movies, 90s New York City, just for this stuff alone. The vibe was so different. I mean, events like this.
I responded to the bombing in 93 also.
Yeah. And so again, being down there, did you get down there on the immediate dispatch or a little bit later on in the day?
No, we went down there the next day. I was working in 33 truck,
Okay.
and everybody was going through, so we had to go down, and they wanted a secondary search of the building, so we're walking up. And then I was at the command post with Battalion Chief Larry Burns, who was in the 1st Battalion
Yep.
and knew the building like the back of his hand.
Yes, he did.
And Larry was the chief in the movie that the two French brothers did.
Yep. He came out of retirement. He so a little context for the audience, and most of you guys know this, but for those of you who may not, Larry retired in 1998. He retired 5 years after this. When, like a lot of retired guys from the PD and the FD, he came back. He got down to
Yes.
Battalion 1 and that day and joined up with a then rookie who's a lieutenant now in hazmat, I believe, Tony Benetatos. And they went down to the building where they were right there.
Larry was instrumental in what was actually being done with that Proby. We were out at Proby school. Larry was out there when I was out there, and they came and these two French brothers wanted to do a movie about the life of somebody becoming a fireman who had no background in the fire department at all. So they met Larry and he brought them in, and this whole thing came about. So they knew Larry, and Proby was assigned to the 1st Battalion. And then they followed Larry around. Larry's since passed away.
Yeah, he died of 9/11 cancer.
Yeah. Larry's, we're related. His daughter is my wife's best friend, and his daughter and son-in-law are my son's godparents.
Oh, wow.
And my wife and I are godparents to her daughter. So we are very joined at the hip.
Small world indeed. And I'll never forget what he said in that documentary, where he said, again, this is a guy who retired 3 years ago, could have just watched it from a distance, but he went right down there and almost lost his life because, like I said, him and Tony were underneath Tower 1 when it started to go. He said in that documentary, they're my firefighters, that's my building, that's my city. You could take the man out of the FDNY, you could never take the FDNY
Nobody
out
knew
of the
the
man.
building more than Larry, so he was invaluable.
Yeah, he was one of the few guys on the either side of the aisle, law enforcement or fire-wise, that really knew the World Trade Center quite well. I'm going to hit on 9/11 and the guys from Ladder 7 that made the ultimate sacrifice that day momentarily. But you went back to the academy in 2000. After Y2K died down in 2000 proved to be just another year. You were down there really until the end of your career, helping build, in between, of course, being down at 7 Truck. New buildings down at the academy. You go down to the academy now, it's like a city in and of itself. It's an amazing layout.
Yeah.
So tell me about being involved in that.
I had gone back to the firehouse in February of 2000, and then the fire department was getting plans together to build a new fire academy at Fort Taunton. They had gotten Fort Taunton from the military, and they wanted to build the fire academy there. And they had money appropriated, and they weren't getting clear title to Fort Taunton. And they didn't want to spend the money and then be told, okay, get out. So the decision was made to add to the fire academy at Randall's Island. So at that time, they had a lot of different fire officers on a committee going in and out, but nobody wanted to commit to like being a day-to-day person. Around August of 2000, Commissioner Von Essen called me down to his office and said, listen, we need one person to be the point person for this, and I'd like you to do it. I wasn't really looking to leave the firehouse in 24s, and go back to work in day shifts. But it was an interesting project and to have far-reaching implications. So I said yes, and I asked, how much input am I going to have? And he said, I'm going to have my fingerprints in everything. Part of the design, oversee the construction, coordinate with the training going on at the fire academy, because we're going to be building the new buildings right in the middle of the existing fire academy. So that interested me. I called it building Disney World for firemen.
And it is. It really is, especially nowadays.
A lot of innovative things there.
Yep.
one of the drawbacks of the old fire academy was that, and it wasn't that old when I went. I mean, the fire academy was built in like the early 70s. So by 79, when I went, it was fairly new, but it was static. You couldn't change anything. To do fire training, you had to burn pallets and tires in a building and then drag them out and dry things out and try to light it again, you know? So we said, we need to get guys through more quickly. So we looked into propane burn buildings, which was, you could light the fire, put it out and start it up again, but it was also safer. You could hit a button and shut it down. The burn building is one of the most innovative things. You can have fire with smoke, fire with no smoke, smoke, no fire. You can have a flashover roll over their heads. We could play sound into the building. So if you were making a search, we could play a recording of somebody coughing or a baby crying, or just fireground noises like saws and breaking glass. So it made it more realistic. Plus, you could change the layout of the building. So just because you went there and went through it as a seasoned firefighter today, next year, or 6 months, you come back, how you go through the building could be different. So it was a challenge. You had to think.
Absolutely. I mean, you go down there now, there's even a simulator for subway emergencies. They have a whole
Yep.
train car
I
in there.
designed that building.
And thank you for doing that, because that's one of the coolest things I've seen when I went down there a couple of years ago. There's also a simulator for responding to a plane crash, which is dedicated to the memory of the Deputy Chief Downey.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What were we going to say on that?
And then the other innovative part was the field house, which is like a covered street.
Mm-hmm.
4-story buildings on one side, 3-story buildings on the other, typical buildings in New York, with a roof over it. You could raise a ladder in there or a tower ladder. The only thing you can't do in that building is use water. But you can use water in plenty of other buildings.
Yeah, you could simulate it. Yeah.
Right. For searches, for operating in different buildings, we put a net over the 1-story taxpayer in that building so that in inclement weather, you could still do rope training instead of canceling it for the day because it's 2 degrees outside or raining and you lose that day of training. So there's radiant floor heating in the street so that you could do a graduation ceremony in there, or the probies do PT in the winter instead of, out in the rain or the cold. So very flexible. And that was what we were looking for. The genesis for the subway building was the MTA has a building where they do training in Coney Island. And you can't send all the units like from the Bronx and Northern Manhattan, Staten Island to Coney Island. You can't take them out of service for that. So you can only send local, close units. But the fire department needs to train on that. Plus, there were also things you couldn't do in Coney Island. You couldn't move the car away from the platform with a hearse tool because you would crush their platform. So when we built the one in the Rock, we built for that. We built so that they could do that. We brought the rescue companies in and said, what do you need to do? And we made sure that the building would, withstand the abuse.
And it can to this day. And I mean, listen, if imagine telling guys, I mean, when you were going through the academy in 79, that's what the facility would look like today. I mean, they would shake their head. It's so modern to the point where you got departments, from nearby areas. Stanford, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, then again, Chief Morris, of course, has a big hand in that. But Stanford will send guys down there to train. It's a great training ground, not just for New York City guys, but even guys around the country or in nearby areas, Jersey, Connecticut, to come down and learn. Yeah. That's a testament to how well the facility has been rebuilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good work. And again, Commissioner Von Essen, who's been on this show as well, as you know, he wasn't lying when he said you were going to have your fingerprints on it, So we'll hit on September 11th real quick before I get to a couple other things before the rapid fire. Quite a number of guys, and I have the list in front of me. And one guy I want to talk to you about in particular because he was a fellow captain, of course, at 7. You had Captain Richard, who has a school named after him in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Nice
My nephew, Larry Burns' grandson, actually teaches there.
Nice. Yes, and that's a lasting testament to Captain Richard's legacy because that man loved the FDNY. He loved the fire service, and you see footage of him that morning getting ready to go in and kind of doing a size up before he enters, and he looks very calm. He doesn't look
That's
flustered. I'm
the
sure.
whole crew in that picture is the whole crew from last.
And I have that picture. I'm going to display it momentarily. George Kane, Rob Fody, Charles Mendez, Rich Muldowney, and Vinny Princiata. Some of these guys, you see a video of them walking in behind Squad 288.
Yes.
About to make entry. In that picture here, let me just share the screen real quick. And for those of you, most of you in the audience have seen this photo, but I want to really display it here, which is these are the guys, and you see them in that top photo. You see the rig on the bottom photo in the aftermath. I'm sure so much was going through their mind. They knew what they were going into, and they knew there was a good chance they weren't going to come back out, but they didn't hesitate. They did a little size up. You could see quite a few of them looking up in that photo, including Captain Richard. They knew it was bad. They still went in. And unfortunately, they didn't come back out, tragically enough, but their legacy lives on. And again, we could talk about all of them all night. And I don't mean to single out one guy over the other, but just you had the distinction of serving alongside Captain Richard. And even if you guys were on opposing shifts, you still had a hand in the layout of the culture of the company. So what do you remember most about him?
Well, Vern was promoted captain posthumously after.
Oh, okay. So he was a lieutenant.
He was one of my senior lieutenant in Ladder 7.
Gotcha.
So, being a first-time captain in Ladder 7, working in Manhattan, I relied on my lieutenants. Now, Vern was a firefighter in the Bronx like I was.
Yep.
He was a firefighter in 17 Truck in the South Bronx. So, kind of came from the same places. But a lot of what I wanted to do as a captain, I bounced off Vern first. I would sit down and say, hey, I want to do this. What do you think? Because senior man had a lot of time on the job, more time than I had. And I valued his input. So, he knew the guys, and he wasn't a pushover, but he looked out for the guys.
Yep.
Looked out for the best thing. And a couple of times if I thought I wanted to do something and he didn't think it was a good idea, he would say so. We came up with do's and don'ts, right? Because we were getting a few probies, and we said, you know what? I'm not going to take it for granted that they know what to do the first day they walk in the firehouse. So we came up with, like 5 do's and 5 don'ts. And just when they came in, welcomed them to the company and said, if nothing else, learn these.
Good guiding point.
You don't want to, because we saw a couple of guys that started off on the wrong foot. Like if nobody told them, be the first one up after dinner and clear the table, get in the sink and clean the pots. If nobody told them, they could start off on the wrong foot. So
and that's not their fault. Nobody told them.
No. So we're telling you.
Yeah. And again, he was one of the posthumous promotions. Afterwards, like I said, he's got the school named after him in Brooklyn, which has spawned a new generation of people that wanted to be firefighters and have, partially because of his legacy. I don't know how well you knew the other guys in the company, but if you did, share some recollections about them if you can.
Richie Muldowney just loved being a fireman, was a volunteer fireman in Freeport. Richie also was a master carpenter. Did great finish work, but just a pleasure to be around. George Kane, real big skier, would make some mutuals, take time off in the winter, and go out to, I believe it was Vail, and I think he was a ski instructor out there. George, the dude, was always looking to transfer out of 7 Truck and go uptown to Harlem. Yeah. Chucky Mendez, great guy, big Ranger fan.
Love that.
Vinny Princiata grew up in the Bronx like me. Actually went to school with one of my cousins in the Bronx. Great guy. Used to do something totally on his own, go to one of the hospitals and bring the kids like stuffed toys and stuff. Just no publicity, just did it for the right reason. Really good guy. And Bob Fody, always on his phone. I used to have to tell him we'd be responding and he'd be on a call. But again, all the guys wanted to be firemen. Happy to be there. Never have any issues with the guys. All really good guys.
And
You
again,
know,
you
and really
yeah.
missed in the firehouse.
Yeah, and like I said, the defining besides that photo, which is very poignant considering the fact that none of those guys in that photo made it, and obviously the video of them walking in with 288, and none of the guys from 288 made it. It's just there's a video, and it's just a compilation of the various emergency vehicles that responded that morning. You see a lot of guys from the Port Authority Police side, the NYPD side, the FDNY side, who you're seeing in that video for the last time. And Captain Richard is on the sidewalk, Lieutenant Richard at the time. Is on the sidewalk, and again, I see his face in my head right now. He's looking up like this. He doesn't look flustered. He doesn't look scared. I'm sure a
Nope.
lot was going through his mind, but he's just very calmly kind of getting the picture of what's going on. You see the police directing traffic, people, civilians fleeing the building frantically, and he kind of just has this look on his face, like okay, and he starts to walk.
Yeah. I
And
mean, it was serious, but we're going to work. And I think
Mhm.
when you look at the movie, The Two French Brothers did,
Yeah,
you see a lot of guys in there,
yeah,
and you don't see fear.
no, I get chills talking about it.
Yeah.
Guys were ready to go, and they knew it. Listen,
See Father Judge in that movie. You see
mhm.
Terry Hatton, who's the captain of Rescue One.
Yep, Dave Weiss in there from Rescue One as well. And the part for me, Chief Jonas talked about this, and I've had the good fortune of having the chief on this program, where he's in the lobby, and I forget who else he's with him. By the way, you see Chief Palmer in there, you see Chief Burns, you see Chief Prunty in there too. But there's one point where,
Yeah.
yep, Vihan, and you see they're getting ready to go up, and this part isn't shown, but Chief Jonas talks about it. He's a captain that day. Jerry Nevins from Rescue One is in that circle. So it's about 6 guys, including then Captain Jonas. After the second plane hits, Jerry Nevins kind of turns to the guys. He's like, "Oh my God, we might not live through this." Very calmly said it just the way I just said it. And gradually, as Captain Jonas describes, each man looks at each other and says, "Fellas, if we don't make it through this, it's been an honor to know you." They shake hands. They kind of make their peace with it. They head on up. Of that group of 6, the only one that's still with us today is Chief Jonas. All those
Yeah.
other guys kind of made their peace with the situation. And we throw the word around guts a lot. You hear it a lot in sports. Oh, what guts to take that shot. Oh, man, that was a gutsy move on his part. Maybe it was. That
Yeah. I
is
agree.
guts. That is guts. And those are just several stories that live on. I did want to ask you too, and we kind of talked about it with guys that retired around this time frame, because of what was going on pension wise, being exhausted mentally from losing so many friends and digging through the pile. Had this not happened, would you have still left in 2003, or were you one of those guys that kind of had it in your mind, you know what, I want to do 25, 30 years and then get out?
I planned on doing 35.
Okay.
I retired because in 2002 I fell down a flight of stairs and tore up my shoulder. And they
Okay.
told me, "You're never going back to the firehouse."
Yeah.
And that made up my mind that if I can't go back to the firehouse, I had done OEM, I had done the rock, I finished the construction. We were just winding up at the time I retired, and I was like, I'm done working off the line. I'll go do something else. And because of those other things I did, especially working at OEM, again with John Hughes. John Hughes had retired and was working for a company, MPRI, and said, "Come and work for me. We're doing full scale drills." There was a lot of Homeland Security money around, and that started me off on a whole nother career.
And one that's still going strong.
Yeah. That led to working with them, led to working at Lehman Brothers, and then Barclays and Morgan Stanley. So it's like everything in my career, and with totally not being planned, didn't plan any of that out. Just kind of fell into place where did something and somebody came to me and asked me to do something else. So
kind of a domino effect.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you try it out. Like even when I went to work for Lehman Brothers, I was not looking to put a suit on and work 5 days a week in Manhattan. My wife said, "Do it for 6 months. If you hate it, you quit. Go back to consulting." And then it kind of worked out.
Yeah, and in line with that, and then I want to hit on your book too. I don't want this interview to pass us by without talking about that. As a consultant, building construction is through the roof right now in Manhattan, no pun intended. You got a lot of high rises going up. Really, everything across the city is going up these days. So, as far as someone, listen, you did a lot of BI in your career. You responded to a lot of different types of fires in your career for different types of buildings, as we talked about tonight. What do you like about what you're seeing in the modern day codes and modern day construction? What is a source of your greatest concerns about modern day construction in New York City?
Firefighters still have to go up in the building. Once you get out of the reach of ladders, it's a different, and they're not going to build 10-story buildings anymore. Everything's going to be high.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to factor in that a firefighter at some point has to go up into the building. They're building these buildings now that are like sliver buildings. They're, very small footprint, but 60 stories tall. I'm not a fan of that.
I don't like it either. It gives me the creeps.
I am not a fan of that. Those buildings have to sway. And when all the systems they build in don't work, a firefighter still has to put it out. I think the fire department has to treat things differently. Say, you could do whatever you want, but this is what we're going to do. At a certain point, we're going to write it off. Most of those buildings have sprinklers. Okay, so fire shouldn't get of any consequence. But if a plane runs into a building, firefighters still have to go upstairs and take care of the mess. I've done fire drills in the new Freedom Tower,
mm-hmm.
and it's huge, and it's built differently, but it's designed. No building's designed to take the hit of a 747.
Right. It's
and with the resulting fire, but it's built to be more substantial. There's
mm-hmm.
a lot of redundancy that's built in that wasn't built in to the original Trade Center. So they're safer, but now they want to build wood high-rise buildings. Okay, when they're new, maybe okay. Let's see what happens as they start aging. And we're not going to know for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But no matter what they do, it's still a firefighter, that has to deal with the mess. And I don't know if you remember this, but at the very end of the movie Towering Inferno, they asked Steve McQueen about what could be done. The architect, Paul Newman, asked Steve McQueen, the fire chief, how can we make them better? And I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says, start asking us how to build them. Start asking firefighters how to make them safe.
And how not to build them too. Because the thing to remember with the original Trade Center, as has been brought up, hindsight's 2020, but it was built outside the building code. Rules weren't as stringent in the 70s. And I'm not saying this was the case.
They were. They were. Local Law 5 came about in 1973, but that was a Port Authority building. So it didn't have to answer to even, to New York.
Yeah. So that kind of created problems.
And that's still the case today.
It's still under Port Authority jurisdiction. Because here's the thing too to remember is when you say, okay, plane hitting a building, we think of course, mostly in the post 9/11 era, that day, or if you're a history buff, you may think back to 1945 when a B-52 mistakenly hit the Empire State Building. Even just a smaller plane, 5 years after this, I was talking about in the last episode when Corey Lytle, 2 days after, the Yankees got eliminated, was taking flying lessons with this pilot instructor, hit a building in Manhattan. Was it the size of a 747? No. But again, you have to worry about is if something like that happens, are these apartment buildings, forget just the high rises for businesses, is it built to take that? And like you said, imagine, and you see it, and I would never want to work on the upper floors of these buildings, a skinny, it looks like almost like a giant Lego.
Yep.
I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and just a few years ago, we had a helicopter land on the roof.
And the pilot was killed.
Hotel in Midtown Manhattan,
on
50th Street and 7th Avenue.
Yeah, and it wasn't intentional. Neither was Corey Lytle. It's just something went terribly wrong. Corey Lytle didn't mean to do it. That pilot that ended up unfortunately dying didn't mean to do it. But stuff can go wrong, and you never know. You just never know. Even fires on top of the building. We see something on top of the roof catch fire. Even if nothing hit it, it creates a problem because, as you said, regardless, firefighters are going to have to go up. So I know that keeps you busy in the consulting world. The thing that I want to hit on with you before we get to the rapid fire, And we've been talking for almost 2 hours, but this conversation has been very enjoyable. It's been flying by. You've been doing great. A Fireman's Life for me, my time in the FDNY, 1979 to 2003. I'll link in the description. I'll share the screen here so the audience can see it and get it on Amazon. You know, it's not easy because you did a lot. You saw a lot, and there's the book there for you, those of you watching on either YouTube, X, LinkedIn, or Facebook, to kind of compress these stories and figure out what's going to fit in the book and what's going to be left out. I can't imagine this, and I can relate to it because I wrote a book myself, you know, how hard that must have been for you. What prompted you to write the book? Take me through your process. And, you know, when you look at the end result, how satisfied are you with it?
Well, very satisfied, and nice to have something actual in my hand. And the genesis of all this was about 10 years ago. My father-in-law said to me, you know, over the years, you've told us a lot of stories, funny stories and different stories of things in the firehouse. He said, but nobody's ever going to remember this, like kids, grandchildren, this and that. He says, you got to write them down.
Yep.
I said, you know what? That's not a bad idea. So I just took a couple of notebooks and started writing and wrote it. It actually wasn't hard. I wrote it chronologically. I started from the beginning and wrote it freehand. And then when I had like 8 or 10 marble notebooks and I let it stew a while, I took my time and put it into a Word document. And then printed a draft and showed it to my kids. And that was, you know, a couple of people, and that was about it. And then during COVID, had time on my hands. So I went back and went through it again, dusted it off, added a few stories, tightened it up, put some pictures in there, and then just went to Kinko's and printed 2 copies, one for each of my kids. And it got passed around the family a little bit and got some good reviews, you know, and that was it. I wasn't going to do anything with it. We have a friend who's actually a best-selling author. She writes like murder mysteries. And she read it, and she gave me a lot of positive feedback and said, if you want to sell it like as a novel, go in and take like 5 characters and like build stories around them. But I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be my story, my memoir. So I didn't do that. And then a couple of years ago, my son's girlfriend read it, and she said, you know, you should get it printed on Amazon.
Yep.
I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know anything about it. And she had 3 books printed published on Amazon. So she said, I'll do it for you. So I said, okay, go ahead. And she kind of walked it through the process, and it went to an editor and a formatter, and came out on September 8th.
Yeah.
And it was nice to have a copy in our hands that, you know, it's like a real thing.
Yeah. So, I felt the same way when I wrote mine. It's, you know, to see it and it has your byline on it, it's a special feeling.
Yeah. And you know, I wrote it as my story, and it's my story, and a lot of other firefighters in New York are going to have similar stories, and I wrote it for the family, and I gave it to a friend of mine in Seattle. I gave him a copy, and he's reading it, and he texted me and said, as I'm reading the book, he says, I hear your voice in my head. It's like you're telling me the story. I'm not reading it. And I said, okay, then I come through. So that was nice.
Yep. That's the biggest compliment any author, any writer can get. Yeah. You know, they feel like they're right there. That's a book I got to get my hands on. So I know I'm going to scoop it up off Amazon as soon as I can. And I will make sure to read it, and I add it to my vast collection here on the bookshelf.
If you like it, do a review.
Yeah, I certainly will do that too. So I'm glad I could ask you about it. That brings us now to the rapid fire, which is 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. Before we get to it, a word from our friends over at Armor Tuff. Firehouse floors take a beating. Rigs rolling in, gear drop down, chemicals and spills every single day. That's why departments nationwide are choosing Armor Tuff. Armor Tuff epoxy floors are built for fire stations. Slip resistant, chemical resistant, easy to clean, and tough enough to handle anything the job throws at them. It's more than just a floor. It's a safer, sharper, and more professional foundation for your house. And here's the bonus. Armor Tuff is an authorized dealer for Groves. So if gear racks, PPE extractors, or dryers are what you're after, you'll find them here. Heavy discounts apply for Getting Salty listeners. So install an Armor Tuff floor and get Grove's products at dealer cost. Armor Tuff, built for firefighters, built to last. Built to last indeed. Of course, now we get into the rapid fire, like I said. So the first question is, Ladder 7 was one of your longer stints, 6 years there, compared to stints in other places. 124 was another long stint for you, but focusing strictly on 7, what's your favorite memory from there?
I got to tell you, it was the night of 9/11. Like, a lot of great things happened there. Funny stories, different things working with the guys. But the one memory that sticks in my head is on 9/11, after being down at Ground Zero, about 11 o'clock, a group of us, close to a dozen, got back to the firehouse. Actually, we were walking back, and someone in a van stopped and asked if we needed a ride. And we were filthy dirty and said, like, "No, you don't want us in your van." He was like, "No, pile in. I'll bring you back to the firehouse." So he drove us and dropped us off in front of the firehouse. And when we got out of the van, there was Ladder 7's apparatus in front of the firehouse, covered in paper and dust and everything. It didn't get hit with anything other than the paper and dust, but it was filthy and covered in stuff. But there were easily a dozen or more firefighters, active and retired, sweeping the rig off, cleaning it off, dusting it off, getting everything ready to go. We had lost the whole crew. All the companies around us were gone. Ladder 3, Ladder 4,
Yeah.
Ladder 2, right? There was nobody else around us. They
5.
lost their captains, they lost their crews, they lost their rigs. Lieutenant Mike Catino from Engine 16 was light duty at the mass service unit. He pulls up in a pickup truck and he's got masks and radios. Some of them didn't look like anything New York City had. I don't know where he got the stuff, and we didn't ask, but we had masks on the rig, we had radios, we had the tools, and we went back in service at midnight. Called the dispatcher at midnight and told him Ladder service is in service. Ladder 7 is in service and ready to respond. So we were like that whole Murray Hill, Eastern Manhattan area of Midtown. We were it. What that showed me is what these guys had in them. Nobody told them to come into the firehouse. Nobody called anybody up and said, "Get in here." They just did it.
Yeah.
Especially the retired guys. It just showed me, like, no matter what happens, they were firemen. They were going to get ready and go to work. And it really helped, I think, our recovery in that we're responding. Guys had a focus. Like, of the other companies, guys came to the firehouse the next day. They had no apparatus to respond with. They couldn't do anything. They sat around the firehouse. And I didn't think that was good for us. Responding kind of got us back, on the horse, got us back doing what we do. And I think that helped. Guys were still going back and forth to the pile digging. But I think being able to respond and seeing the guys, put the rig back in service, that's my favorite memory.
That's a great one. And here we are, again, almost a quarter century later. We're still learning stories about the day. Never knew that.
Yeah.
Never knew that. I'm hearing that for the first time. Thank you very much for sharing that. Awesome. I don't know how we topped that, but we still got the rest of the rapid fire to get through. That was a heck of a way to start. You played for the FDNY hockey team for a decade. So we had Eddie Jacquemin, we had John Van Beesbrook, we had Mike Richter, and we also had Henrik Lundqvist. And in between that, we had Nick Gaudiosi as the goaltender, primarily for the FDNY hockey team. So with that said, a lesson you learned playing goalie for the FDNY hockey team that you think applies to hockey overall and the fire service too?
Oh, a lot. You know what? You have the same number of people on a ladder company, 6 officer and 5 firefighters. You have a goalie and 5 skaters on a hockey team, right? So there's a lot of synergy there. But also, being a goalie, there's all this chaos going on around you, but you have to focus on your job. And it's the same in a fire scene, whether it's an all hands or a second alarm or a third alarm, there's a lot going on. and it's just focus on your job. If you're the engine company and there's people jumping out windows, that's not your job. Somebody else will take care of it. Do your job. Because if you're not doing your job, nobody's doing your job.
That's it.
So
It's true.
and that's what I learned. It's like learn to tune out the chaos and focus on your job.
And even if you do your job, and just applying it to hockey, you can make up for any potential shortcomings. So I'm a diehard Ranger fan myself. I'm all New York Yankees, Knicks, Giants, Rangers. Those years with Henrik Lundqvist, I call them the everything but the cup teams because they went pretty far. They just were never able to get the cup, got to a final, but didn't win it. The defense in front of Henrik was not particularly good, but he was able to really carry them a lot of nights just by knowing his job and doing his job and stealing some, forget, games, but playoff series even. I think about when they came back from being down 3-1 against Pittsburgh in 14, the next year when they did it against the Capitals in 15. A lot of that was because Henrik just, decided we ain't losing. The greatest goaltender I ever watched, he did it in Buffalo, he did it in Detroit, Dominic Hasek, same thing. Yep. We ain't losing. Locked in, did his job. There you go.
Why Lundqvist is in the Hall of Fame and never won a cup.
Yeah.
Yeah. That good.
Yeah, he was that good. And that's no knock on, not his fault. No, and that's no knock on Mike Richter, who did win a cup. Mike Richter was the same way. He was just as integral to 1994 as Brian Leach was, or Mark Messier, or Adam Graves. But again, a great goaltender goes a long way. And even though I hate them as a Ranger fan, a lot of people knock Martin Brodeur. Oh, he had Ken Danigo and Scott Niedermayer and Scott Stevens in front of him. He did, and those were fantastic defensemen. Marty still had to stop the puck. And more times often than not, he did. He did. So glad you mentioned that there. Third question, the rapid fire. One innovation that you're most proud of from your training days?
I think it's the burn building that we talked about earlier, because and doing that fire academy that, affected, I wouldn't want to hazard a guess at how many firefighters have gone through the fire academy since 2003. And well into the future, about every firefighter in New York City, and as you said, beyond, has been trained in that fire academy. So probably the burn building is the biggest innovation to change the way we did some training.
Absolutely. Fourth question, the rapid fire. Again, you went to a lot of fires over the course of your nearly 25 years in the job. What's one that from an educational standpoint you feel, if you could single one out, and you could say multiple if you want to, that left a lasting impact on your career?
It's one that happened when I was probably within my first or second year at 45 Engine. We had a fire in the Bronx in an apartment house. We were second due engine, and we're moving the line up the stairs, fire on the top floor. 58 truck was in an apartment pulling ceilings, and the apartment lit up. Somebody had poured gasoline in the cockloft and set fire to the building. So Jimmy Spolin, the can man in 58 truck, was pulling the ceiling and said to the captain, "There's something dripping on me," and the room lit up. Kenny Kelledy was the irons man. And Kenny Kelledy was also the coach of the fire department hockey team when I got on the job. Mm-hmm. And the captain was Captain Nemchek. And the lasting memory I have is that Captain Nemchek came diving out of the apartment. He had no gloves on. His hands were burned. To be graphic, they looked like 2 lumps of chopped meat. And the burns ended up putting him out of the job. He had come to the firehouse like a week or so later from the burn center, and he said to us, "Guys, wear your gloves. Always wear your gloves." Right? That had a lasting impression on me. Now, the gloves the fire department was giving us at the time were these, and they're very heavy gloves. They're not very dexterous. To do anything, you have to take your glove off. To take your glove off on the fire ground, and you may never find it again. And and the fire in the Bronx always stuck in my head. I never wore the fire department gloves my whole career. I wore like cowboy gloves, leather gloves, had a drawstring on them. I put them on in the rig, and I took them off in the rig. I never had to take them off to do anything, put my mask on. So it affected what I did the rest of my career, that I would never go in a fire without my gloves on.
Good lesson to know. Good lesson to keep. PPE saves lives. Listen, I'm learning that too as I go through Fire 1 and Fire 2. Always wear your PPE, know your PPE, but also always don it and doff it too, but don it effectively before you go in. And doing live burns, that certainly came in handy. Thankfully, I didn't get hurt in the live burns, and that's part of it. Donning your PPE correctly. Last question on the rapid fire: what it means to have spent basically a lifetime. I mean, between your consulting work and obviously the 24 years in the job, improving safety on the fire ground and beyond. What's that mean to you if you had to define it?
Very satisfying to know you had some sort of an impact. When you leave the job, and it's like you turn it over to somebody else. But then the jobs I had with the investment banks, where now my job was not fire suppression, it's fire prevention. So to train people, and especially in the beginning, people really 9/11 was fresh in everybody's mind.
Mm-hmm.
People wanted training. They wanted to hear what to do. So it was very easy. I had very supportive managers that supported things we wanted to do to make the building safer, to make the employees safer. We're starting to get away from that. We have a lot of people in those buildings now who weren't born on 9/11. And they don't take it as seriously.
Or we're babies.
Well, we're babies, and they don't take it as seriously when we do fire drills and EAP drills. So, but to know that you're having an impact, that's the most satisfying.
Absolutely. This has been amazing. Stick around. We'll talk off air. But before I say goodbye to the audience, if you have any shout outs that you'd like to give, Captain, the floor is yours. If you want to shout out anybody, friends, family. You got anything? I don't know if you heard me. I was saying if you have any shout outs, is there anybody you want to shout out? Did I lose him?
Are you talking to me?
No. Yeah. If you had any shout outs.
No, I don't have it.
I'm like, oh no, did I lose him?
I'll say one. No, I didn't know if you were talking to somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
When I was in Brooklyn, we formed a study group, and we studied for lieutenant captain and chief together. Vinny Mavaro, Rich Beanstein, John Roque, Mike Sorrentino, and Bobby Albanese. We carried each other through 3 tests, and it was great. Great to be with those guys.
Absolutely. I mean, it paved the way for what you were able to do. Yeah, I should have clarified, that I was talking to you. My bad on that one. Like I said, stick around. We'll talk off here. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, we may have 2 shows on Monday, so we'll see how it shakes out. I know one of them, I'm working to confirm the other one. That's definitely going to take place, barring anything unforeseen. Started out in the Los Angeles Police Department, made his way over to the NYPD. That's a career you usually see in a movie, but he lived it. It was real life. I'm talking about David Goldstein, who'll be here to talk about his experiences in both places. Before I also make mention of tonight's outro song, the funeral services for Patrick Brady, the FDNY firefighter who died in the line of duty a couple days ago, operating at a fire. He went into cardiac arrest while cutting a roof on a building, are set. So for those of you who may be interested in attending, his wake is going to be Thursday, Marine Park Funeral Home located on 3024 Quentin Road in Brooklyn. Visitations are going to be from 2 to 4 p.m. and again from 7 to 9 p.m. per the FDNY. The funerals for the next day, 11 a.m. at Church of St. Francis de Sales at I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not. 12916 Rockaway Beach Boulevard in Bell Harbor section of Queens. So again, wake is Friday. Marine Park Funeral Home address is 3024 Quentin Road in Brooklyn. 2 to 4 p.m., 7 to 9 p.m. visitation. Funeral mass per the FDNY the next day, Saturday, 11 a.m. Church of St. Francis de Sales, 12916 Rockaway Beach Boulevard over in Bell Harbor, Queens. Keep his family in your thoughts and prayers as they navigate this very difficult time, both his family at home and his family at his second home in the firehouse where he worked and was certainly beloved. For those of you listening on the audio side, from their 1991 debut album, Mental Jewelry, live returns to the Mike the New Haven podcast to play us out with Operation Spirit. In the meantime, on behalf of retired FDNY Captain Nick Gaudiosi, I'm Mike Colón. This has been volume 78 of the Best, the Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. And we will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your night.